on stage, there's 5,000 people out there coughing and sneezing and laughing and cheering.
Sir Cliff Richard has always been known as the clean-cut Peter Pan of pop. For decades, he was the star who stayed out of trouble, never married, and kept his private life strictly behind closed doors. But after 29 years, the mystery is finally starting to unravel. It turns out that while he was performing for millions, he was also managing a completely different life away from the cameras, one that he kept hidden from even his biggest fans. So, what secret did he keep hidden for nearly 3 decades? And why is the truth only coming to light now? Join us as we uncover the secrets of Cliff Richard's double life. Faith, fame, and the choice that changed everything. Long before he was the world-famous star we know today, Sir Cliff Richard started his life as Harry Roger Webb, born on October 14, 1940, in a hospital in Lucknow, India. His early years were spent in a beautiful but changing world, where his father, Roger, worked a good job for the Indian Railways, and his mother, Dorothy, looked after the family. They lived in a comfortable home in a place called Maqbara, and Harry grew up surrounded by his 3 sisters, Joan, Jackie, and Donna, while his grandmother helped run a local girls' school. It was a life of comparative wealth and sunshine, but the peace didn't last forever because of the rising violence and big political changes during India's fight for independence. By 1948, his parents realized they had to leave their home behind and move to Britain permanently for a safer future. So the whole family boarded a giant ship called the SS Ranchi for a 3-week journey across the ocean to Tilbury, Essex. This move was a massive shock for young Harry because they went from having a nice flat and plenty of help in India to living in a simple house in North Surrey, where everything was very different. He started attending a local primary school called Stanley Park Juniors, and by 1950, the family finally moved into a 3-bedroom council house in a town called Cheshunt. Harry did well in school, even staying extra years to pass his exams in English literature. But he wasn't really looking for a career in books. After he finished school, he got a very normal job as a filing clerk for a company called Atlas Lamps, spending his days putting away papers while dreaming about the music he loved. His dad had bought him a guitar when he was 16, and Harry quickly became obsessed with the skiffle music craze that every teenager was listening to back then. He started playing in small school bands like the Quintones and the Dick Teague Skiffle Group, but he soon realized that the name Harry Webb just didn't have the sparkle of a rock star. In 1958, an entrepreneur named Harry Greatorex suggested the name Cliff because it sounded strong like a rock, and his friend Ian Samwell added Richard as a tribute to the legendary Little Richard. Now known as Cliff Richard, he formed a band called the Drifters and signed a big record deal, but a funny thing happened during his first recording session. The bosses wanted him to release a sweet song called Schoolboy Crush, but when they heard a different track called Move It, they knew it was a hit and swapped them around. Move It shot up to number 2 in the charts, and suddenly, Cliff was being called the British Elvis because of his cool style and hip-wiggling moves. As his fame grew, he had to change his band's name to The Shadows because an American group already used the name The Drifters. But this didn't slow him down one bit. He was the biggest thing in music. But in 1964, something happened that changed his life forever when he fully embraced his Christian faith. At first, he actually thought he might have to quit being a pop star altogether because he didn't think being a famous singer fit with being a religious man. He even thought about becoming a teacher. Luckily, his friends convinced him that he could do both. And in 1966, he stood up in front of a massive crowd with the preacher Billy Graham and told the whole world about his beliefs. This was a huge moment that proved he could be a man of God and a superstar at the same time. even if some people were surprised. His faith became a big part of his work, as he avoided the wild, hippie lifestyle of the 60s and instead made gospel music and movies about his religion, like Two a Penny. He even took the time to tell off other stars like the Beatles for their interest in different spiritual paths. Cliff became the king of Christmas music, giving the world hits like Mistletoe and Wine and Savior's Day that still play in every shop today. He also tried his best to win the Eurovision Song Contest twice, coming so close in 1968 with the song Congratulations that people still think the voting was fixed against him by a dictator in Spain. Even without the trophy, the song became a massive worldwide hit that everyone still knows by heart. Outside of singing, Cliff became a huge movie star in fun musical films like The Young Ones and Summer Holiday, where he and his friends traveled around in a big red bus. He was all over the TV too, hosting his own shows and becoming a face that everyone in Britain loved and recognized. Because he worked so hard for so many years, he won almost every award you can think of, including 2 Brit Awards and many honors from the music magazines. The biggest moment of all came in 1995, when the Queen gave him a knighthood, making him Sir Cliff Richard, the very first rock star to ever receive such an honor. He managed to keep his private life hidden and stay a clean-cut gentleman for over 60 years, proving that a boy from India could truly become the Peter Pan of pop and stay at the top of the world forever. But staying at the top meant making sacrifices that most people couldn't imagine. While his fans were swooning over his love songs, Cliff was privately deciding that his true marriage was to his career. The stage was his home, and as much as he enjoyed the company of some very famous women, he always knew that the curtain would eventually have to fall on his romances to keep his spotlight shining. The Bachelor of Pop: Why Sir Cliff Never Said I Do. Sir Cliff Richard might spend his days singing beautiful songs about falling in love and having your heart broken, but when it comes to his own life, things have always been much more mysterious. For decades, fans have wondered why the Peter Pan of pop never walked down the aisle, and he finally cleared the air by explaining that his music career simply took up every second of his time. He truly believed that because he was so dedicated to being a star, he wouldn't have been a good husband, telling the BBC that while he definitely felt the spark of love before, marriage was just too big of a commitment for someone whose life was consumed by the stage. But even though he never said "I do," there were plenty of near misses and secret romances that almost changed everything, ranging from a dancer who was left heartbroken to a famous girlfriend who eventually got tired of him talking about their short fling decades later. One of the most famous women in Cliff's life was the tennis champion and TV star Sue Barker, whom he started dating back in the 1980s after a very bold move. Cliff first noticed Sue while she was celebrating a big tennis win in Brighton with his bandmates from the Shadows, and he didn't waste any time making his move. He tracked down her number, gave her a call, and invited her to a concert at the Hammersmith Odeon, which Sue remembers as a really nice night that started their whirlwind romance. Even when Sue had to fly all the way to Japan for her tennis matches, Cliff made sure to stay close by sending her sweet telegrams to cheer her on and chatting for hours on the phone about their shared love for the game. They eventually met up again for a match in Denmark and spent the whole summer together during Wimbledon. But the constant cameras and prying eyes of the newspapers started to drive poor Sue absolutely crazy. Sue actually had a lot of fun with Cliff and loved how kind he was to his fans, never complaining about giving an autograph. But her parents weren't so sure about the romance. Her dad was worried about the 16-year age gap, since Sue was only 25 and Cliff was already 41, warning her that it could become a real problem as they got older. Eventually, things started to cool off between them. And in a move that felt a bit cold, Sue claims Cliff actually had a friend call her to break the news that it was over. They tried to get back together once when Cliff called her out of the blue to say he missed her, but they soon realized they worked much better as just friends. However, the drama didn't end there because years later, Cliff started telling the newspapers that he seriously thought about proposing to her, but realized he just didn't love her quite enough to commit the rest of his life to her. This really upset Sue, who had moved on and married a landscape gardener named Lance Tankard, and she begged Cliff to stop banging on about a relationship that she saw as more of a friendship than a grand romance. She even wrote in her book that if she knew she'd still be hearing about a few months of dating 40 years later, she never would have gone near him in the first place. It felt silly to her that Cliff was still talking about not loving her enough to marry her, when she felt it never even got to that level of seriousness. She felt Cliff inflated the importance of their time together, and she wished he would just respect her marriage and stop bringing her name up in every interview he gave. But Sue wasn't the only one. Back in the 1960s, Cliff was practically inseparable from a stunning dancer named Jackie Irving during a memorable sunny summer in Blackpool. He admitted in his memoirs that they hung out all the time at the shows and in their spare time, saying she was a total blast to go dancing with. Jackie was only 19 and stunningly beautiful, and Cliff actually considered asking her to be his wife. In a shocking twist, Cliff confessed that he actually went to his manager to ask if getting married would ruin his career, and when he was told he might lose a third of his fans, he chose fame over love and broke up with Jackie immediately. When he told this story to TV host Piers Morgan, Piers was stunned and called him ruthless for dumping a woman he loved just to keep his record sales high. Cliff defended himself by saying it just meant he wasn't in love enough to sacrifice his success. But Piers remained skeptical, finding it hard to believe someone could be so calculating about their own heart. Before Jackie, there was another special girl named Delia Wicks, a dancer and singer he met in 1960, just as his career was exploding at the London Palladium. Even though he liked her deeply, and she was his special girl, he felt he simply wouldn't be able to balance a relationship with his rising stardom. In a move that left her devastated, the young pop star wrote her a heartbreaking Dear John letter to end things so he could focus entirely on becoming a legend. Through all these years, Cliff has remained a lifelong bachelor, though he admitted there were other false alarms, like his secret crush on the late Grease star Olivia Newton-John. He confessed that he and many other men were deeply in love with Olivia back in the 1970s, but because she was already engaged to someone else at the time, he felt he had lost his big chance. Every time Cliff looks back on these relationships, he seems to see a pattern of choosing his music and his fans over a traditional family life. He has often said that being an artist is a full-time job that doesn't leave room for the big commitment of a wife and children. While he admits to having been in love multiple times, the fear of losing his spot at the top of the charts always seemed to pull him back from the edge of marriage. Even his close friendship and living arrangement with former priest John McKeelan, which has lasted for decades, shows how much he values a stable but private home life, away from the typical celebrity marriage scene. Sir Cliff managed to protect his personal world from the intense scrutiny of the British tabloids for nearly 30 years, creating a double life where he could be a superstar to millions while keeping his truest self strictly behind closed doors. As the years went by, Cliff became more open about his past, including his health battles and the emotional toll of being in the spotlight for so long. He finally felt he had nothing left to hide, but he still maintained that his choice to stay single was the right one for his career. Whether it was the ruthless decision to leave Jackie or the letter to Delia, Cliff's path to the top was paved with difficult choices that most people would find impossible to make. He traded the possibility of a long-term marriage for the adoration of millions and a knighthood from the Queen. Sir Cliff Richard became the ultimate bachelor of pop, a man who lived his life exactly the way he wanted, proving that you can be a clean-cut gentleman and still have a past full of secret loves and heartbreaking goodbyes. But even the most carefully guarded life isn't immune to the storms of the outside world. While he had spent decades protecting his private world from the intense scrutiny of the British tabloids, a nightmare was brewing that no amount of privacy could prevent. A dark chapter that would force his truest self into the harshest light imaginable. The day the world turned against a national treasure. While Sir Cliff Richard's life often felt like a sunny musical, a dark cloud moved in during 2014 that nearly destroyed everything he had built. It all started with a shocking accusation that the singer had been involved with a 15-year-old boy at a rally in Sheffield all the way back in 1985. As if that wasn't enough, 4 other men came forward with claims of sexual offenses dating from the late 50s to the 80s, and these serious allegations were handed over to the Crown Prosecution Service. Sir Cliff was absolutely devastated and always maintained his innocence, and thankfully, the cases were eventually dropped because there simply wasn't enough evidence to support them. He was never arrested or charged with a single crime, but the damage to his spirit was already done, and he later shared his side of the story in a documentary called The Accused: National Treasures on Trial. In that film, he opened up about the deep hate he felt for his accuser, describing how he would lie awake at night with the weight of the world crushing down on him, wondering how anyone could ever say such things about another human being. The anger he felt was violent and real, to the point where he wondered what he would even do if he ever came face to face with the person trying to ruin his life. It got so bad that Sir Cliff reached a breaking point where he felt he just couldn't live like that anymore, trapped in a nightmare he didn't deserve. Even years after he was cleared, he made the firm choice to never even learn his accuser's name, telling people that he didn't want the man to be real to him because he didn't want anyone left in his heart to hate. He realized that what he actually hated was the very idea that a person could do something so nasty and harmful to an innocent person, and he wanted to move on with his life without a face or a name to haunt his dreams. While all of this was happening, Cliff was living in Portugal, and the extreme stress of the investigation started to rot his health from the inside out. He kept coming down with shingles, and painful blisters began to crawl across his forehead, getting so close to his eyes that a doctor warned him he might actually go blind. When Cliff asked the doctor how on earth a person even gets shingles, the doctor gave him a small smile and told him straight out that it comes from the massive amount of stress he was under. It wasn't just the accusations that hurt, it was the way it was handled, as the police search of his home was actually broadcast live on television for the whole world to see, before he was even spoken to. Cliff felt this was a total invasion of his privacy, and although he was nervous about suing Britain, he decided he had to take the BBC to court to show everyone how serious he was about defending his name. He won that legal battle, proving that what they did was wrong, and ever since then, he has been a huge supporter of changing the law so that people accused of crimes aren't named in the news until they are actually charged. He wants to make sure no one else has to go through the same terrifying ordeal he survived, showing that even the biggest stars have to fight for their dignity when the world turns against them. But as he finally emerged from that legal nightmare, a new and much more personal battle was waiting in the shadows. For years, Sir Cliff had been a master of the double life, maintaining his polished image while dealing with a secret that threatened to end his legendary run for good. He was living a double life for 29 years. Now, Cliff Richard's secrets come to light. While the world saw him as the ever-smiling Peter Pan of pop, a man who seemed to never age and never falter, Sir Cliff was quietly carrying a heavy burden behind the scenes. In a move that shocked his followers, the 85-year-old legend recently revealed on Good Morning Britain that he had been secretly battling early-stage prostate cancer. It is a startling realization that while he was preparing to bring joy to fans on his 2024 tour of Australia and New Zealand, he was dealing with the terrifying news that a routine insurance checkup had found a tumor. He explained that his promoters needed him to be checked out for insurance purposes, and that is when doctors discovered the cancer, luckily catching it before it had a chance to spread to his bones or move through his body. He kept this struggle incredibly private, only now coming forward to warn other men that they are just as human and vulnerable as anyone else. During a deeply moving conversation with former news presenter Dermot Murnaghan, who is facing his own battle with stage 4 cancer, Cliff admitted that while he is currently in the clear, there is no way to tell if it might come back. He spoke with raw honesty, saying that men need to stop seeing themselves as invincible and start getting tested, because early diagnosis is the only reason he is still standing on that stage today. It is a dramatic secret to have kept, performing for cheering crowds while secretly wondering if he would ever see his next tour. And now he is using that struggle to beg the government to listen and start a national screening program for everyone. Even though Cliff is lending his famous voice to the cause, there is a bit of a struggle going on because health experts have been hesitant to start mass screenings, worried it might do more harm than good. But Cliff is not standing alone in this fight. He is joined by King Charles, who also recently reached a major milestone in his own cancer battle. The king shared his own good news that thanks to catching things early and following doctors' orders, he can finally cut back on his treatments in the new year. It is a massive moment to see the King of England and the King of Pop both standing up to say that catching these secrets early is the only thing that saves lives. When asked if he would team up with the king to lead a massive charity campaign for cancer testing, Cliff did not hesitate for a second, saying that if the king is listening, he is ready and available to join the fight. It is a bittersweet reality for the fans who have loved him for decades, knowing he was hiding such a scary secret. But seeing him turn that private pain into a public mission to save others makes his long-hidden truth even more impactful. He managed to hide his health battles just as he hid his private home life for nearly 30 years, proving that even a man who lives in the spotlight can keep the most serious parts of his life tucked away until he is ready to tell the world. The mystery of Sir Cliff Richard is finally unraveling, and what is being found is a man who fought through illness and accusations to remain a legend. But while the world saw the glitz and glamour of a pop star, Cliff was quietly dealing with family heartaches, such as in 1988, when his tiny nephew, Philip Harrison, spent the first 4 months of his life fighting for every breath in a children's hospital. This scary experience touched Cliff so deeply that he spent years raising money for that hospital, always remembering that they were the ones who saved the little boy's life. It shows that even with all his fame, family remained the most important thing to him, even if that family didn't look like a traditional one. For nearly 30 years, Cliff managed a unique living situation that many found mysterious, but to him, it was just home. He rarely lived alone, instead sharing his main house with his manager Bill Latham and Bill's mother, describing them warmly as his second family. Even Bill's girlfriend lived with them for a while, creating a supportive bubble that allowed Cliff to focus entirely on his music, his faith, and his love for tennis. Bill once explained that being a bachelor didn't mean Cliff was lonely. It actually gave him the freedom to go the extra mile in everything he did. Because he didn't have a wife or children of his own, he was able to give himself wholeheartedly to his fans and his beliefs, though this lifestyle often caused people to whisper and start rumors about his private life. For decades, people have gossiped and wondered if Sir Cliff might be gay, but he has always stood his ground and told the world no. Back in the late 70s, he called the rumors unfair, explaining that just because a man doesn't sleep around, it doesn't mean he is homosexual. He admitted that the judgment was very painful at times, but he refused to get married just to make the public stop talking. To Cliff, marriage was a sacred thing that shouldn't be used as a cover-up. He firmly believed that single people shouldn't feel like second-class citizens or be embarrassed about their lives. He knew the truth. His friends knew the truth. And he eventually decided that he couldn't control what people outside his inner circle chose to believe. However, his steady faith was pushed to the absolute limit in 1999, when his dear friend, the famous TV presenter Jill Dando, was tragically murdered. Cliff was so devastated and confused that he actually felt a violent hate and anger toward God, struggling to understand how such a beautiful and harmless person could be taken away so cruelly. He stood by her family and attended her funeral, mourning a woman he described as truly genuine. This period of darkness showed a side of Cliff that was raw and hurting, far away from the clean-cut image the public knew. He eventually found his way back to his spiritual path, continuing his lifelong habit of tithing, which means he gives away 10% of everything he earns to help others. Cliff has always believed that loving money is a trap, so he has spent over 40 years acting as a steward for his fortune, giving millions to charities like Tear Fund to fight poverty in places like Uganda and Brazil. He didn't just send checks, he actually flew across the world to see the work with his own eyes. Closer to home, he poured his soul into helping Alzheimer's Research UK because he watched his own mother struggle with the disease, and he wanted to use his fame to find a cure. He even started his own tennis foundation to help over 200,000 kids get active in school. While he may have lived a secret life away from the cameras, the truth coming to light shows that Sir Cliff Richard's biggest secret was just how much of himself he was giving away to the world in private. What Cliff Richard song is your favorite? Share your thoughts with us in the comments below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Also, click the next video shown on your screen. You will enjoy it.